Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the Electric Auto Association state and local EV legislation, how to get involved. We're so excited that you all are here. It's our first event, I guess, of the year where we're focusing on some education for our chapter leaders. And we have some awesome speakers for you. And my name is April Bolduc, and I'm president of the Electric Auto Association. And it's been really great because we have some very seasoned chapter leaders that have joined us today. And then we also have some brand new chapter leaders. So I know that the seasoned leaders know what the Electric Auto Association is, but I thought maybe for those brand new ones, I'll just give a brief overview. And the Electric Auto Association helps to grow the adoption of electric vehicles across the country and actually in the globe. So we have a little over 90 chapters, which is fantastic. And the Electric Auto Association, really our main goal is to provide support for those chapters that are out communicating. And we know that, everyone has done such a great job of getting virtual. We all miss our events that we used to always go out and do and seeing the vehicles, but there's been really some creative chapters that how they're featuring vehicles and still continuing to educate. And we provide support to chapter leaders through online tools. We do some of the boring stuff like taxes and accounting, insurance, and we do all of that because we want our chapters to be out doing what they do best, which is educating. So thank you all for joining us today. And next I want to introduce Elaine Forseth. So she is the Vice President of the Electric Auto Association. So you may have worked with her either from a membership standpoint or from a chapter leader standpoint. She's also President of the San Diego chapter. So Elaine has been fantastic with ensuring that our chapter leaders get training on our outreach tools, providing great ideas when it comes to chapter events. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Elaine.
Excellent. Thank you, April. So as April mentioned, I'm Elaine Forseth. Most of you know me, VP of Electric Auto, President of the San Diego chapter. And before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll so that we can just get an idea of everybody's level of experience. So take your time, take a look at the poll. It's just, what have you done so far? And feel free to choose as many answers as you need to. So whatever applies to you, go ahead and choose those, and we'll see how it looks here. Give everybody a few minutes. And then, so yeah, we're really excited to have some great speakers today, and stay tuned after the meeting too. We'll have plenty of time for question and answer. And we'll actually talk a little bit about what our next Zoom sessions will be for February, March, and April. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling here so we can see. Okay, so we've got a pretty good mix here. 35% not yet, 40% have written a letter, 20% in a lobby night, about half have called a legislator, and 25% to sponsor legislation, some written testimony, and 35% have given oral testimony. So excellent, good to know. All right. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Catherine Steinkind. She's the Policy Director for Plug-in America, and we're really, really excited to have her with us tonight. So Catherine, take it away.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sometimes if you ever can't hear me in the middle of this, sometimes these headsets go out. It's only the cheap Apple ones that come free with your phone. But anyway, thank you so much for inviting me here today. This is my favorite thing to talk about because this is what I do for a living. I love talking about policy and electric vehicles together. And you guys are so focused on education and outreach all the time. I mean, this is the perfect combination. So I am really thrilled to be here today, and thanks for inviting me. So wow, and I'm a keynote speaker. I mean, I'm just as passionate about this as you guys are, and I've just been doing this longer. So you all will be, I'm sure you'll have experiences to share back with me after this session in 2021, because wow, this is a huge year for opportunity for EV policy, whether it's on the federal level, state level, local level. I mean, this is going to be a huge breakthrough year. So I think you all know about Plug in America, but just in case you don't, we're the voice of the EV consumer along with you all. And we've been around since 2008. And I don't know who was formed first. Was it the EIA or Plug in America, or both at the same time, or one chapter popped up in California and one in Georgia? I mean, I don't know the full history.
We've been around since 1967.
Okay, so you guys went there. But so we focus on policy and advocacy, which is me and my team, and then education and outreach. My colleague, Kat Urquhart, she's our program director, and she runs the Plug Star program. And then Kylie Morgan, she runs National Drive Electric Week, which you all participate in, and then also Drive Electric Earth Day. So thank you for your support with those events too, because they wouldn't happen without all of you. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, well, I'm glad that you guys took that poll just now, because that shows me we've got some ground to cover right now, and none of this should be scary at all. Meeting with your policymaker, a legislator, whether it's a city council member, whether it's a mayor or your state rep, a senator, whoever, it should not be scary, because they work for you. And while they might come with a lot of fanfare, there might be a lot of hurdles sometimes to get through to them and actually get a meeting. Sometimes they work for you, and their business plan is to get reelected. And so they should be taking those meetings with you, because if they don't, then you're going to talk to your neighbor, who's going to talk to your neighbor, who's going to talk to your neighbor, and they're going to start to develop a bad reputation about they're not really representing your needs. So always keep that in mind, is that you have a right to be there, to be meeting with these people, because they work for you and they want to be reelected to office. And so they want to represent you well. And for the most part, most legislators, of course, there's always some bad apples in the bunch, but for the most part, they do want to meet with you. They want to hear back from their constituents and make sure that they're doing a good job. And so to be prepared to meet with your legislator or your city council or your mayor, preparation is really key. So first of all, in even looking at EV policy, you got to do a little bit of your research here. So what does your state or city or your local community have in terms of EV policies? And so there's a number of ways that you can do this, and you're a representative of the whole nation. And so you'll need to then look first at some of these tools there. So one could be the Department of Energy's alternative fuel database, and see what kind of policies are on the books already. And you'd be surprised how many of them are on the books, but maybe just aren't enforced. For example, Arizona, we have, which is where I'm based, we have an anti-icing law that no one really knows about because it's not really enforced. So unfortunately, there's nothing much that the legislature can do about that. But that would be—
Can I jump? I'm just curious, the anti-idling is how long is tolerated of idling?
Well, it doesn't say in the legislation, but it just says if you're not charging, if you don't have the license plate designating you as a clean vehicle, as an EV, then you shouldn't be parked there.
Oh, you mean this? I thought it's about how long can gas cars be idling.
Oh, oh no, it's about the
okay.
anti, yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry.
No, so do your research first with the Alternative Fuels database, or there's another resource there that I put, the Atlas Public Policy website. They have a ton of resources there, and it does, if you want some of the, I think on the next slide, I'll show you what they have to offer a little bit, but that does require a subscription, but it is totally worth it. And maybe that's something that the EIA could look into and work out with Nick Nigra, who's the founder there, and see if that's a tool that maybe could be applicable to all of your members and your chapters. And they have market data, they have all the policies listed per state, per region, per city level. There's a ton of great things there. There's also our website.
That's a great idea, Catherine, too, because I actually do have a subscription there. So that's a good point. We can find a way to get this information out to our chapters. I love that. Thank you.
And then there's our website too, that we are doing a refresh now on our state incentive database. So that's the starting point, is just to look at what your state, city, and local community has. And you're all probably also well aware of various policy needs in your own states and communities. The other thing you need to do is then look up what was introduced last year. And there's a number of different resources that you can use to do this. And one is just LegiScan. I did a screenshot there of what that looks like. And you can easily go to your state and just type in electric vehicle, and then they'll pop up a lot of different bills. And I think that's even for the 2021 session now, but I think you can go back and look at past sessions. And that's important because if there already was legislation introduced on a particular topic, you want to be working with that sponsor, that staff, and there's probably already a coalition of folks that have wanted to put forward that bill. And so you'll need to team up with them. And so that's kind of the last point there. What have others proposed in the past? What are they proposing this year? And in all of the states, except for the Midwest ones, there are already pretty strong EV coalitions. So I would say, if you don't know who are some of the right players and other stakeholders to work with in your state, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with those people. And a lot of them are more environmental based groups, but we're seeing more and more businesses and business coalitions start to be forming and working in the states. And this is the slide about the Atlas public policy, some of the information that they have. This is just a screenshot of their weekly digest, but they collect great data, and it's just a succinct way of then taking that data and then presenting it to a policymaker, whether it's on a market update, a technology change, just what's coming down the pipeline for 2021. So I recommend that you all subscribe to that weekly digest, and that's free. And then, so now you've done your due diligence a little bit, you've done some homework, you've seen what your state currently has, what's kind of in the works. And then now you need to also take a step back and think, well, what's needed in the state? And so we've, together with the Sierra Club and the Electrification Coalition and Forth, we've put out the Achieve Model Policy Toolkit. And this past year, last summer, was the 4.0 version. And at the time, I thought it was for sure the most comprehensive list of policies. And now, since then, there's already been a couple new policies introduced in various states that now we'll need to do a 5.0 version. So this toolkit, though, it's segmented for various audiences, and you can see them that are listed there. There's governor's offices, legislators, transit agencies, regulators, cities and local government, and businesses. And those are all groups that you can technically be educating or lobbying to implement supportive EV policies. There's also in the toolkit, the policies are bucketed into different categories. So there's things concerning the purchase incentive of the vehicle. There's things about infrastructure. There's some policies for ensuring that equity is addressed. There's policies for utilities, a whole range of things. So if you're looking through the toolkit too and you see a policy that we have not included, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to include it. There's also a couple other resources there that I just listed there of things that we have on our website and areas that we're covering. EV fees is a big deal, a big issue, and that's definitely going to be popping up in a lot of different states this year. And so we've put out a white paper on that, and there's a lot of other resources on EV fees that I can share. There's a paper by the National Governors Association, by Consumer Reports. I think every single environmental group has a paper on EV fees. So there's a lot of good information out there. We also just released a report on utility education and outreach programs. So that's another area, if you're interested in that, take a look at that report. And then we're also going to be releasing in a couple of weeks a 25 state ranking. So this might be helpful to see where your state ranks up compared to some other states. We have a white paper coming out on EVs and rideshare applications. And then there's also a used EV buyer's guide that has a list of used EV incentives in there. So now that you've figured out what's needed in your state, you can look to see what you have, what are other policies out there that are going to help to propel the market forward, what you might need. And now you have to prepare your fact sheet and your leave behind. And this helps you then to form all your talking points too. So in your fact sheet, I mean, I'm sure you all know this, but just to reemphasize a little bit here, you just clearly state the ask for what is needed, and be sure to tie in health and air quality data and the American Lung Association's Road to Clean Air report or the State of the State report. They've got great data in there. And then tie in how the policy will address equity concerns. That's at the top of every policymaker's mind these days. And then also tie in economic development and the jobs angles. That will never leave a legislator's mind either. That's always, they're always interested in how it's going to bring investment into the state, into the city, into the community, et cetera. Other data points, and I know that, I think, Bob, you're going to address this later, some other good data points in terms of the benefits, the societal benefits of EVs. But for maintenance, Consumer Reports just put out a good piece last year about maintenance. For EV market growth, there's the Bloomberg New Energy Finance Report that is updated every year. For cost savings, the e-gallon calculator on the Department of Energy people love that thing where you can easily compare how much a gallon of gas costs in your state versus what the cost of charging would be equivalent. And I did a screenshot of that e-gallon calculator up in the upper right corner. And then life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, that's also a very hot topic. People are always asking about that. And I particularly like the Union of Concerned Scientists site because I think it does a good job of looking at that full life cycle cost. And really with your fact sheet, you're keeping it really simple, no more than 2 pages. So you've done all your research now, and now you're in the meeting. And this is the most important part because I have definitely been in meetings with EV drivers before, and everyone is so passionate and wanting to tell their story that, you know, that takes up the bulk of the meeting, and then you never get to the actual ask. And so you have to keep it really succinct, and people only remember about 10 minutes of what you tell them. And so you should really go into the meeting, tell a quick personal story about, hey, I live in your district and I drive my EVs down Main Street and we go to the supermarket and it's so convenient, it's easy, I love it. And then get to the point. That's it, that's enough of the story. Get to the point. You've got 10 minutes that the staff is going to be writing information. You've got their attention, and then they're thinking about their lunch. They're thinking about the next thing. So get to the point. Be sure to also link to other goals in the state or city or local community. So many of the states now have climate and carbon goals. So that's a good thing to tie in about why you need your certain policy. Make it an urgent case. Really say that we really need this year, because if we don't get it, well, we live in Texas and the legislature doesn't meet for until 2 more years, and by that time it's going to be too late. So, make it to be an urgent case. It's also really important if you invite them for a test drive. Of course, you all know many of the legislators and city council members, mayors, etc. They've never even seen the cars. They don't recognize them. We get so siloed in our world that we think, everyone knows about electric vehicles, but that's just not the case. So invite your representatives there for a test drive. And then finally, at the end of the meeting, be asking for a concrete action step. So you've laid out your case, you've laid out everything here. They're kind of bought in, they're like, okay, yeah, now ask them for something that they're gonna do. Will they agree to take on sponsorship of this bill? Will they agree to support it? Will they agree to make that change? Will they connect you with one of their staff members or work with their staff member? Be sure that you're coming away with something concrete from them, because otherwise they have meetings like this all day long. That's what their staff does, meeting after meeting after meeting. And so be sure that you're coming away with that takeaway item. And then in your meeting, it's also important to bring in other supportive, diverse groups. And I mentioned the Moms Clean Air Force group. I had no idea how many thousands of members they have. They have tens of thousands of members across the nation. So I recommend that all of you guys in your states reach out to these Moms Clean Air Force members, because they are super gung-ho about clean air, which EVs do. And then also there's a group called Chispa out there. They're a great group to connect with too, and they provide some diversity. And then after the meeting, you just keep following up. I mean, as we all get sidetracked with things in our lives, they do too. So if you don't hear back the following week, you just keep following up the month after, the year after, and the year after, because policy takes time. It really does. I mean, we've been working on the federal tax credit for many years now to get that extended, to get the cap lift, to get it modified, to have it be a point of purchase, to not even make it a credit, be a rebate, a grant, something. I mean, it just takes time. So be persistent in your effort there. And try to meet with other legislators too, even if they're not necessarily your representative. Sometimes they're just interested in the topic. And so, don't be afraid to reach out to other legislators there. And then also, I know a lot of you are really good at inviting your policymakers to NDO or DEED events and having them sign proclamations or resolutions. And that's a great way for them to get photo ops, which they always love because it makes them look good. And again, their business model is to get reelected. And so the more that you give them that opportunity to shine and look good, the more they're going to be inclined to, pick up your piece of legislation and sponsor it. And yeah, that was all I had today, but I'm happy to take questions, or if you want to wait to the rest of the presentations, whatever worked for your schedule there.
No, I think it's great if anybody has any questions, to go ahead. And if people didn't happen to see the chat, I made a note that we will send out an email to everybody that's been registered for the Zoom here with all of the links listed. And then we'll see if we can figure out a way to get that onto YouTube also.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly point out that it is important to to follow up, and you can follow up with the legislative director. So you meet the first time with the legislator, but then they have staff. And if you can get the business card of the staff, then you can make a connection with them. And if they see you like at one or two sessions, and you should always leave your own business card, then then the next time there's any EV thing, you're kind of on file, and then they can actually, and this has happened, they've reached out to us and say, hey, can you help us with this bill? So.
Excellent. Yeah, great point. We had someone in our chapter that just got an anti-icing ordinance passed in Carlsbad, which is a town north of us. And he did a presentation to the San Diego chapter, and he actually titled it something about how to be a pest and get things done, because it's like you just have to keep at it, and it took a while for him to kind of get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm coming from New Jersey, and New Jersey has set up a goal of how much percent penetration of EVs they want to have. And so I'm working also in environmental commission, just local body. And so what I need is examples of ordinances that have been taken elsewhere, so that we can have it kind of posted on our website and have it available to New Jersey municipalities. So that would be very helpful. Is it part of the Atlas EV Hub?
The Atlas EV Hub, no, but depending on the ordinance, there's sample templates of policies in that Achieve policy toolkit. But yeah, depending on what it is, I mean, you can, from that Achieve policy toolkit, we link to actual statutes from other states so that you can just copy that same kind of legislative text.
Yeah, so it's not only helpful that there is already precedence, so that they can take it as a model, but that somebody has taken it. So it's not like I'm trying to come up with something that nobody did it before, but say, hey, here is actual model ordinance that has been adopted somewhere and it worked. So this would be very helpful to have.
So, yeah, if you let me know what the particular ordinance around it is.
It's like mandating townhouses, those owners of rental facilities, that they have to allow people to install charging station, right? So if you do not own your home, you want to be able to actually install it, even if you don't own it. The other thing is to mandate that when you have a new construction, that it should be mandatory that you put wires underneath the parking lot or wires in the garage. Actually, even if you build a personal house, it should be mandated that you have available capacity in the panel, and that you have possibly even installed NEMA 1450 plug, so that it's not forcing you to have electric car, but if you choose to have electric car, or whoever else owns the house, just can simply plug it in, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, that building code with the new construction, that's for sure in that Achieve policy toolkit, and there's sample text in there. It'll take you to the site for that, and that's usually with the International Code Council, different iterations of that then has to be adopted locally. So there could be a push then locally for them to adopt that, the strongest iteration of that code. And then the first one about the rentals, yeah, I don't know if that's in the toolkit. There's various things about HOAs, but that's slightly different. It's like a cross between building codes, it sounds like, and the HOAs.
I think I've heard the terminology of the right to charge.
Mm-hmm.
See the California statute and the Oregon statute on that topic. We both have them.
But that does bring up a good point, and it might be a stereotype, but it's absolutely true in that legislators like to see others who have gone first. So part of your argument to the legislator should be some background to be the first. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, Virginia just did it. Just say New Jersey and Virginia have their elections on off cycle. So let's just be like Virginia.
Well, we have now very good governor, so we used to have Christie. That was disaster.
The other
Steve?
thing that we have found here in Maryland is I'm in Annapolis, and if we get our city to pass relevant legislation and the county, then that really gives kind of political cover to the state representatives for them to do the same thing. So it doesn't matter what level of jurisdiction you're talking about, it's all good.
Good point. Any other questions for Catherine? All right. Well, thanks so much, Catherine. That was excellent. And really appreciate you being here and sharing with us. So now I'm happy to introduce Bob Erdman. He is chapter leader extraordinaire, and he is part of the Electric Vehicle Association of Greater Washington, D.C., which actually covers Maryland and Northern Virginia. So his chapter has been really, really active. For those of you that don't know him and aren't familiar, they've done tons of ride and drives for legislators and testimony, written and oral testimony for legislation, and all different kinds of things. So without further ado, I am going to turn things over to Bob.
After Catherine gave the overview, and we're going to tell you what we do in Maryland. So we're the Electric Vehicle Association of Greater Washington, D.C., covering Maryland, Northern Virginia, and D.C. We're just covering Maryland, but we do have a shout out to Jeffrey, who's from EVADC and covering legislation in Virginia, and also Charles Garina, who's our the next chapter kind of to our south, also covering Virginia from Richmond. Then one thing I'd like to point out is our members have driven 4.7 million electric miles. And this is something we like to use with policymakers. You know, if you're talking to a policymaker and you say you represent your chapter and your membership has driven so many millions of electric miles, you know, it helps make your point. Yes. So with me is Scott Wilson. I'll let Scott and Russell introduce themselves. But I'll just finish off by saying I'm the treasurer of EVADC, legislative participant. In my background, you can see I like to set up EV events at high schools and colleges. And Scott?
Yeah, I'm Scott Wilson. I'm EVADC vice president, and I've also been on, there's a state body called the Maryland ZVIC, Zero Emission Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council. And this was started by Governor O'Malley, and it was meant to help EVs develop in Maryland. And so I'm one of the representatives on there, and it has a lot of state bodies, like state agencies. It has automakers, it has charger people. It's more of a forum just to bring people together to let them know what's going on. And also as part of legislation, I started something called MELT, which is the Mid-Atlantic EV Legislative Task Force. And that was basically to organize testimony for bills so that you didn't have to come up with it fresh every time. You had kind of people on call that were ready to go and kind of knew what was going on and could quickly write letters. And so because we found that there was like huge email chains cycling around of trying to gather testimony for bills, and that's very inefficient. So that's what I've been involved with. Russell.
Hey everybody, I'm Russell Corbin, EVADC member from Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm also a student at Pomona College, and I'm really excited that I've just started working at Plug in America. I'm a policy intern there. I work with Catherine, and so yeah, I'm really excited to be learning more about this, all this excellent work that's going on around the country, and being involved with it. And a little bit later on, we'll share just a little bit of my experience with some of the work I did in Maryland. So thanks.
Scott, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we've had bills. Our session ended prematurely in March, so there were several bills that got halfway through, and then the session ended, so they were truncated, so they have to start all over again. But they do have a basis of testimony in place, so they'll probably have a pretty smooth path to passage. And the first one is the Clean Cars Act, which is an excise tax credit for EVs. And we've had this for several years, and it's funded by a fund from, it's called the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. And the problem with it is that it has a certain pot of money, and the money gets used like right away as soon as the bill is enacted. So, and then you're put on a waiting list. So there's always a struggle to increase the pot of money. So that's what's going on this year. They're trying to increase the money, and you can also change the amounts that different cars get. And now we've put in like a lesser amount for plug-in hybrids, and then you could have a mileage cutoff for plug-in hybrids. These are all things you do if you want to stretch the dollars. And another bill that we're working on is right to charge, as Stanislav pointed out. So yeah, it's basically you can't prevent somebody from putting in a charger, and the legislation has the driver paying for everything and the insurance. So they have to pay for everything. So there's very little risk to the homeowner. I mean, to the HOA. And this actually did well because the trade group got involved, and they have passed a resolution in favor of right to charge, basically. So we had testimony from Lisa Harris-Jones, which was the head of the Community Associations Incorporated. So that really helps to have the trade groups on your side. that just smooths things. And that might take 2 or 3 cycles to get that. But yeah, and then EV pre-wiring, we had a bill that requires 240 volt charging in only new construction. And then there was like new townhomes had that also. And so then there's an anti-icing bill, and the anti-icing bill has been around for several years. And so there's a lot of kind of degrees of freedom on that. Do you want marked parking spots or signage, and it turns out that signage is the most important thing. So you need to have a standard sign that says, and the official one says no parking unless charging, basically. So and that can be enforced, because if there's no sign, it can't be enforced. And then, yeah, we have a bill on EV school buses. So school districts tend to be extremely price sensitive. And so they're putting in requirements. This was a bill that basically presented school buses, and now that's going to be kind of expanded out. And like in Montgomery County, where I live, there's a public-private partnership where the company's going to buy all the school buses and then kind of lease them to the school district. So those are all different models of ways you can do it. And yeah, we have an active member who runs a site called Plug-in Sites, and he has a very useful EV legislative tracker. And from all over the country, right now I think there's mostly just Maryland, DC bills on it, Virginia. But this is this is what you need to do to keep track of these bills, because a lot of times you have several going in parallel. So you need to keep track, what's the bill number? There's a link to it. So you go to the link, you can read the bill. You can read a marked up copy of the bill, because the bill changes over time. So you need to get the most recent version of the bill. And
this is fantastic. This is what I need.
Yeah, and it's going to tell you like when the hearings are, what time, where do you need to be. And so, yeah, this is a super useful tool.
Yeah, and if you're in your state, you don't have something like this, then it's useful to find somebody in your chapter to look at your state and try to get something similar.
Yeah, it's good to have one person keeping track of the bill.
And sometimes I see here like Lanny, this is run by Lanny.
Lanny Hartman.
His information is here. He's not part of our chapter, but he's part of the coalition of people in Maryland that are working towards EVs. I see here he said the New York info was provided by somebody from Long Island. So from New Jersey, Stanislav, you might be able to
yeah, I don't see anything here from New Jersey. I am absolutely unaware of this site. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I just know from the past that last year he covered, he is kind of more in the Northeast, but he did have New Jersey. He did have some of the New Jersey
there
stuff
is
last year.
stuff, yeah.
So
Wow.
we have this, we'll be sending all these links out as well afterwards.
Yeah, so you can learn about bills on Legiscan or just Googling, EV bills in your state, and you're probably going to get to know the website of your legislature very well. So how to find bills, how to look up who's sponsoring what. So.
Yeah, I know the state, yes, but the municipalities, they have their own individual ordinances. They have their own sites, so that I don't think whether this exists. But for state, I know, yeah.
So next, this is something that Catherine covered pretty well. And actually, when I got into this, things were already going. So I didn't really have to figure out what was going on in our state.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to go back briefly. We don't have an EV fee bill. Well, there was one introduced the last time, right at the end, and it kind of, maybe it was a shot across the bow or something. But so we've been talking about EV fees, and the current kind of consensus position is we want to hold off EV fees until we get a certain number of registrations, and this official state goal is 300,000 by 2025. So the position is no fee until we hit that goal. Another idea that's been brought up, which is very interesting, is you could say, go ahead and put in the fee, but make it kick in when you hit the target. So then you're on the record as saying, yeah, you have no problem with an EV fee as long as you meet certain benchmarks. So, but there's no official EV bill yet. But we have our intent yet.
So this is more or less a review of what Catherine already said. You need to find out what's already going on in your state, connect with groups like local Sierra Club, Clean Cities, work with your legislator, and also you may find that, like for instance, I work a lot with a legislator that's not really my legislator, but he's the one who's putting in EV bills. And actually, we even have some bills that we've suggested to him, and he says that he's too busy, but he might know some other legislators who are interested in taking up the bill. So Scott or Russell, you got anything more to add to this one?
Yeah, well, we are very, very fortunate to have this delegate, and I put in the chat that it's good to try to build up a kind of database of EV driving legislators, and so this fellow has been our kind of pathway into that. So he knows everybody, and he's sold them, like he's let them ride in his car, and then they end up buying a Tesla. So then I'm trying to keep a database, because what you want to create is an EV caucus. So you want to create like a collection of legislators who are your allies, and that could be, very useful.
Yeah, so we've got the chairman of the Transportation Committee and the chairman of the Transportation and Environmental Committee both drive EVs now, which can make it interesting when questions come up sometimes, because they answer them.
Yeah, they've posed some very interesting questions to certain kind of industry lobbyists, so that can be entertaining.
So Scott, this is part of your getting up to speed.
Yeah, so this is, I call it being a trail boss. So the person who's keeping track of all the bills, they're the trail boss. So one thing you have to do if you're going to do testimony, and this all assumes we're done with COVID. All the testimony now is going to be online, but so assuming we're back to normal, then you want to let all of your people who are going in person to testify, you have to do a lot of the legwork ahead of time. Like, where do I park? What building do I have to go in? What door do I have to go in? And then what room do I have to show up in? So those are all things that you want to scope out ahead of time so that people aren't figuring this out for themselves, because that's very inefficient. So that's why I made this map and I hand it out to people. And also another trick is, what's the Wi-Fi password? Very important in the building. So tell
Yeah,
people.
as an example, when we had like an HOA bill, like the one that Stanislaw was talking about, we looked around, we asked around, we found people who were actually affected. They were in HOAs and they were having trouble. So we got them to come testify, but they don't really know much about how to testify. So Scott helped them out to figure out how to do it, essentially.
Yeah, and it's very important to have the kind of regular public come in and testify, because they carry a lot of weight. You'd be surprised. The legislators hear from lobbyists all the time, but they know that if somebody took the time and trouble to come in person, then there's probably 10 or 20 or 100 people who would have wanted to come but couldn't. So they're very kind of friendly, and they thank you for coming and thank you for your testimony. And so just regular folks carry a lot of weight. You'd be surprised.
So I guess one, you go ahead.
Should I touch on? I can touch on the testimony because
Sure.
In my experience, I had the opportunity to testify for the electric school bus bill in Maryland when it first popped up. It was 2 years ago now, and it was a really rewarding experience. My first time testifying in the Maryland House, and so it's rather intimidating and the whole process and everything. But I was doing it with other people who had done it before, and so that was really helpful. And yeah, I mean, I would say as a student, I sort of told a bit of my story, and I gave a bit of my ethos, what my position was in representing a number of students back in my county, and talking about my personal experience with electric vehicles as well. And it's sort of it really should be as much of an emotional pitch, I think. At least this is my take. Everyone has their own way of doing it, but I appeal to hearts and minds, I think is a really great way. And with school buses, there's not a better what's the word, combination, a synthesis of the two, because you've got kids and you've got clean air, and so it just makes perfect sense. And I just sort of tried to present that take to all the people in the room. And I also submitted, so I submitted oral and written testimony. It was just basically the same. I said the same thing, but just for the records or whatever. And yeah, just to reiterate the whole process of, how to format the testimony, to how my testimony should be structured, to, literally where to go and all that. I was very lucky that I had people who were also testifying for the same bill, who I was with, and they'd done it a million times. And so having that help the first time was really useful.
Yeah, it is nice to go kind of as a team. And
yeah,
the other thing you have to do is you have to figure out how to submit the testimony. So you do it on paper. So how many copies do you need? Do you have all your copies? And who do you turn it into? And if you turn it in on a flash drive, then how do you do that? And normally, like in our case where we go, they'll help you upload it from the flash drive onto the computer, but then you have to put in the last name first and then the bill. Is it favorable? Is it favorable with amendments? Is it unfavorable? So these are all the little kind of mechanic things you have to work about. And I've got tips on doing testimony also. Like for example, you can you write out your letter, and you can read your letter. That's fine. A lot of times it's good to just kind of hit the high points, and because you only have like 2 minutes, and so you say, yeah, my remarks are my written testimony, and I would just like to add that X, Y, and Z. And the other interesting thing is you can hear the other side sometimes, depending on the order that they go in. If you hear you can look at the testimony of the other side, and then you can respond to their arguments. And so in your testimony, That's useful. And you can also anticipate their arguments. So your testimony can say things like, you will hear that electric cars are, you know, expensive, and here's why they're not. Or you will, you will hear that, you know, X, but here's why it's Y. So those are kind of tips.
Yeah, so to part of what Scott was talking about, like for example, in years past, when there like the HOA bill, there was a lot of negative testimony, and then afterwards we would go to the office and we could get copies, but you really had to. It wasn't that easy to do. And now in Maryland, they have the witness list. This is from last year. You can click on it, and all the testimonies there online. Something I put in. Here's Scott's testimony from last year. So it makes it much easier this year going forward. You see an example of how to format it, what kinds of information to put in. And, you know, one thing that's kind of interesting is you can go, for example, if a bill is in the House and you see some negative testimony, you can prepare what you're going to say in the Senate based on what you've seen in the House. And it's maybe not quite as useful, but you can also see now the testimony. This is from last year.
Is it okay if I bring my panel? Thank you.
There was myself and Scott coming in for the bill last year, but it's really great now that this is all linked up. It's all linked up and easy to access. At least in Maryland, it is, and if you have a similar bill, or if you have a bill that you can't find these things, you could check the Maryland website out to see if you know, go to Lanny's website and look for a similar bill, and you might be able to see similar testimony, especially the written testimony that you could borrow. So, any more on this one, Scott or Russell?
No, that's all I have.
So this is something. So last year, Scott and I were trying to get the amount of money in the incentive bills to be more than was in the bill. In the calculations that we did, it turned out that we thought the money was going to run out because it had run out before. So we were looking at all the different benefits that electric vehicles bring, like, you know, looking at the health benefits and other ones. And in the end, because of COVID, the bill didn't finish. But then later, actually, due to something that Catherine showed us a document, and I found in that document, I found something called the Societal Benefits of Electric Vehicles from Ingrid Malgrim. And I ended up getting in touch with her. And basically, this document covered everything that we were trying to do. It was already done. And we worked together and sponsored Ingrid, and she put together an updated version of it. It's really different, a little bit more towards what we're trying to do. And it takes all these benefits and puts it into about 12 pages. But we know that a lot of times legislators don't have that much time. So we also made some legislative one-pagers. So if you're going to a legislator, you bring these one-pagers. This is an example of one of them. I don't know if you can see it very well, but we will send out links and you can see it. So for me, what I didn't have the first time around was economic benefits. So just based on, this is based on 8 years of having a Kona. So Kona gas versus a Kona EV, you should save around $3,900 in fuel costs. And that alone would pay for the benefit, just that economic. So essentially, basically, the money that you save by not buying gasoline will be spent in the economy. And that drives the economic benefit. It gets spent maybe 1, 2, 3 times around. Then there's other benefits, of course, that we know from the greenhouse gases, which really accrues to the world, health benefits to the state, energy to the country, and electric systems. If things are set up right, that should also accrue to the state. You know, we have some lines in here like if all drivers were driving electric, we save $18 million a day. So $18 million is spent every day in Maryland now on motor fuels. And 80% of that leaves the state. So these kinds of things are really to get the attention of the legislator. And this sums up the 12 pages just in one sheet. And on the back of the sheet, we have some room to put something special. Right now, we just have all the different bills we're putting forward. But if there was a certain bill that we're pushing forward, we could put it here. And we're actually looking at two different kinds of these. So we have this one, and we have this other version that looks completely different. And that's really the point of it. Actually, the one delegate that we work closely with, he said that a lot of these things look similar. So something like this is good. It really catch the attention of the legislator. And so we made these for. Let me see. I put up here. We made these for Virginia and Maryland, but if any other chapters are interested in something like this, they could get in contact with me, and we can work with you to try to make some kind of a special sheet for your chapter. And finally, we also have this info sheet that we hand out. In general, we hand it out, but when we put in legislation, sometimes we'll take this and we'll append it to the end of our legislation. And that's it I have. Any more questions? I think that's in general, we're done.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob and I have walked the hallways of the legislators, and it is really useful to be able to have something you can just drop off in an office. And so that's why we came up with the one pager.
Yeah, and some of this, you stop the share. So, some of what Catherine was talking about, as a one pager, some of that the information there could be put into the one pager she was talking about, I assume.
So, Bob, maybe I could spend like 2 minutes on wanted to present Virginia for that.
Sure.
Thank you. Let me see. You'll have to let me share screen if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So this is what the equivalent Virginia legislative site is. And many legislative sites do allow you to register to go into their system. What Virginia calls it is lobbyist in a box. So you can create a lobbyist in a box account, and you can save bills that you're interested in and track them by not only this, but also email. So you'll get email notifications every time it's assigned to a committee or comes out of a committee or disposition changes on the bill. So when you go to your bills, for instance, Virginia, we're looking at a bill for state air pollution to create low emission vehicles to get Virginia on the LEV standard of electric vehicles. Or another one, this is a great one that may match. Washington State has a great bill for EV rebates on used and new electric cars. This is about the equivalent of it. Charles Gerenia and I testified on the original version of this bill. We were very happy to see it go through a study and get it through to be in the committee again, or through the legislature again. And also a electric vehicle transportation bill, which is for setting up EVSEs across the Commonwealth of Virginia. But what I wanted to also talk to you about, and we'll go right to this rebate bill that, as I say, this is the companion piece that Charles and I testified for. Another thing you can do, the person that sponsored this bill, David Reed, I gave him, Delegate Reed, a ride in a ride and drive event that Charles organized down there in Virginia. And he really enjoyed riding in my Tesla. And as I say, a year later, he did present that bill. And the other cool thing is that, of course, he is friends with me on Facebook. You can follow him on Twitter. And many of these legislators do go on social networks. So befriend them on Facebook, follow them on Twitter, especially your own legislator, and interact with them. They do sometimes interact with the social networks. And in fact, David, it is his birthday today. So of course I tweeted and Facebook messaged him, or Facebook posted to him to thank him for posting this bill. So there's other interesting ways that you can interact with your legislator in the modern age. And that's pretty much what I wanted to present to you guys. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, thanks so much, guys. That was awesome.
Good work. Thanks all.
Thanks.